Hey guys, first Regardsman here, and so I'll be talking about the state of Rogue Trader with Revan619, a Owlcat content creator. Do you care to introduce yourself, man?
Hello, I'm Revan619. I run a YouTube and I'm just dipping toes into streaming whilst also creating build spreadsheets to help remove barrier to entry to what is otherwise a very complicated CRPG.
Yeah, Rogue Trader is probably my favorite 40k game right now. Now, a lot of people have actually not tried this game out yet. Rogue Trader came out around 2 years ago, like December 2023, so it's been almost 2 years now. And the game is in a significantly better state now than it was at launch. It had a very buggy launch. A lot of people complained about like performance issues and just overall balance issues. You have been playing this game like the entire time. I have personally put in about 250 hours into Rogue Trader. You've been playing way more than that. I'm curious how you feel Rogue Trader is now versus the state of the game at launch.
Well, interestingly, when I first started playing on the original launch week, a friend had bought me the game because I wasn't going to get into it because I was just about to start finishing up Kingmaker and then eventually going into Wrath of the Righteous. But a friend knew that I liked Warhammer and he actually bought me the game. So I got into it myself. But yeah, the first month, the game was barely playable. And I actually quit until the 1.2 update, which was almost a year later. And I've been playing it over 1,000 hours since in the last year. So it's much better now, much more stable, much more enjoyable. There's still some little areas that you'll notice a little bit unfinished towards the end of Act 4 and Act 5 especially, but there's always hope for the next DLC because the next DLC seems to be focused on the final enemy of the game.
That is true because currently the later acts of the game are lacking content quite a bit. I think that's like the biggest issue I heard a lot of people talk about post-launch, even with like some of the performance issues being fixed, was that the game is like seriously in a poor state towards the end, and the finale feels very underwhelming. As far as how well Rogue Trader captures 40k, I think that a CRPG is like the perfect type of game for a 40k setting, because 40k just has so many factions, so many different types of characters, so many planets and areas you can go to, that in like a third person game, or like a shooter kind of like Space Marine 2, it is hard to like fully represent that. But in a CRPG, it's pretty easy to do so. And a lot of people aren't aware that Rogue Traders are like one of the first things ever brought out in 40k period, so having a game around them I think is pretty cool. And this entire game is based around a very old system for the tabletop. Did you ever play that at all?
No, I'm actually trying to get a physical copy. I played it online many years ago, back in college, when friends first got me into 3.5 for Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, I've been trying to get a physical copy of the original one since I started playing this with the CRPG, but it is really hard to find.
Yeah, because Rogue Trader is like one of the first things ever. Like some of the old box sets are like straight from the 80s. It's that was even before a lot of the retcon lore we had here for like the say quote unquote retcon, but before the Horus Heresy in a lot of cases,
Hmm.
or like what we had for what was basically the mainline story of 40k now. Now, do you think that there's a huge barrier to entry for new players in this game? Because I feel like a big issue a lot of people have with Rogue Trader, beyond bugs, beyond mechanics, and like build difficulties they have, is the reading. There is a
Mm.
tremendous amount of reading in Rogue Trader, way more than just like builds, just like the amount of dialogue in the game. All of this is not voice acted. This is not like Baldur's Gate 3, because Owlcat just didn't have like the budget for that or the time to do such a thing at that point in time. Now, Dark Heresy, their next game, is supposed to be fully voice acted, but in this
Hmm.
one, I feel like, they did their best, but there are a ton of paragraphs. How do you feel about those?
Well, it is literally a novel crammed into it. And one of the reasons why voice acting is kind of sparse after Act 1 is because there's just so much text and they didn't have the
True.
budget to do that. But you are right, they have confirmed that the next one's not just getting a visual upgrade, but they are going to be fully voice acted. But when it comes as barrier to entry, then yes, if you're an old school CRPG fan, this is actually perfect, even if you don't know the lore, because the game does something really good, which is every time there's a Warhammer specific term, it will highlight in gold, and if you right click it, it will open up an encyclopedia that explains that and everything around it, and you can actually jump page to page like an in-game wiki. So if you're like, for me, I actually hadn't been up to date with the lore since third edition, because that's when I was playing Collector when I was a wee lad. But coming back into Rogue Trader, I've been able to massively catch up on where the lore is. And then obviously, Space Marine 2, I was having to learn what the hell a Primaris was.
Yeah, the Space Marine 2, I feel like was the introduction for a lot of people to 40k in general. Do you feel like Rogue Trader is a great spot for like a brand new player to pick up like a game into 40k and learn the entire universe? Personally, I think it's in a great spot for that because 40k Rogue Trader captures a lot of what 40k is about and a lot of the factions in 40k in a way that you just can't do in other games. Because, like you said, it is basically a novel crammed into a game, and because of that, you get all the benefits of a novel, even though you have to read up pretty much all of it post Act 1. But I think this game really helps you learn about things like craft worlds, the Eldari, and things like that, even Drukhari. And you don't really get to see that in a lot of 40k properties, especially within games. So I'm curious if you think this is like a good jumping off point for like a brand new player to 40k.
Oh, for sure. And it really teaches you about the factions. One of the biggest mistakes you can make in this game is trusting other alien races based on our own morality, because they have no concept of our morality. They are truly alien. It's not, I'm just a space elf. It's, no, I've been around since before your species even had a world to call their own sort of thing. And our version of morality and how we view you is completely beyond your comprehension. So stuff like they'll lie, they'll manipulate, they'll pretend to be on your side, and they'll betray you at a moment's notice. And there's a lot of intrigue and story depth with that. Like, one of the biggest mistakes you can make in this is you can let a gene stealer cult go, and if you know what that is, then you know that's a mistake.
That's pretty bad. I feel like a Rogue Trader is just like a great character to basically jump off into a full 40k gaming experience, because Rogue Traders have so much leeway compared to like 99% of Imperium forces or like Imperium characters, because Rogue Traders they can deal with Xenos and stuff like that. They basically have the ultimate hall pass in the form of the what they call them. My brain is farting on this one for the giant note, the giant scroll they have.
Yeah, the trade.
Yeah, the trade.
The warrant of trade.
The warrant of trade. Yes, the one that was written by the God Emperor himself in some cases, or the Primarchs. But the point is that you have the ultimate hall pass to just go into the galaxy, have zero issues whatsoever, like negotiating with like Xenos. And even though the Inquisition might give you like the side eye in a lot of cases, they'll be like, okay, it's a Rogue Trader. And even if, you know, they have an issue with it, Rogue Traders are so unfathomably wealthy that it's a big pain in the ass for like any Imperium force to like even try to deal with them in the first place, even if they are like, you know, a rogue trader. So for that reason, Rogue Traders just have all this leeway, and it's a great jumping off point for any type of 40k story, in my opinion, because usually you don't get to deal with Xenos factions directly in 40k, because things like Space Marines are like, okay, purge the Xenos, purge the heretic, and in any case, there's going to come across them, and in most cases, just shoot them, which is kind of an issue for like, you know, having a gameplay experience, especially in a CRPG. Now, do you think that a CRPG, or I should say, you know, Alocat's previous CRPGs have a similar level of open-endedness to them, or do you think Rogue Trader is like the most open-ended with like the most player choice?
Well, when it comes down to player choice, obviously you do have a lot within the story, because essentially, like you said, a rogue trader has a warrant of trade, which is a contract from the Emperor himself that says that you can only answer to the Emperor. And with him no longer given direct commands, essentially, even the High Lord of Terror can assign you rogue traders, but once he's done, he has no power over them. And essentially, if, say, the Inquisition wanted to go to punish you, they need to literally go to war with you. They can't just tell you what to do. And it's the same with a lot of the other factions with it. Unless you are openly committing heresy that would put the entire Imperium at war with you, then they essentially do what they want. And that actually has quite a bit of intrigue in the game, because you are consequence 3 until you specifically overstep your bounds with a Xenos faction in the game. And it's the first time you suffer consequence. Act 3, I won't give spoilers, but it's my favorite part of the game. It's the first time that you're ever made to feel helpless. Until that point, everything within your sight you own. You want to destroy a planet? Done. You want to take over a planet? Done. You want to create a new colony? Done. So it's very good for that, and it's just such a great representation of the world of 40k, like you were saying before, because some games, they don't recreate the world very well, even if it's a great game. Like Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't tell the story of the Sword Coast.
No, not
Most
really
people
at
don't
all.
even know what that is if you play Baldur's Gate 3, and it has its own world and lore, but you don't know about any of that. Whereas in Rogue Trader, you do learn about that. You do learn about the Great Rift. You do learn about the way that the Imperial cult works. You do learn about the factions, and with the Xenos races you interact with, you have the Eldari, the Drukhari.
They even show like the interaction between other rogue traders. So like not all rogue traders are as wealthy as each other. I think it's very clear, like, you know, the one you play as, like the Von Valancius dynasty, and they are arguably just the strongest rogue traders in the Chronos Expanse. And even though you find some other ones It's pretty clear that like as far as the top dog is concerned, that's just your Rogue Trader empire basically, and everyone else is a little bit below that, even if they are filthy wealthy. And having it be like this large scale galactic expanse, I think is a really cool thing. I know Dark Heresy is going to be on like one planet, but I do
Mhm.
hope we actually get to see more stuff like this, or they keep expanding upon Rogue Trader once Dark Heresy is out, because Owlcat is actually really well known for pretty much just, supporting their games even post-launch when they have a brand new game out. Like, I'm pretty sure Wrath of the Righteous still gets updates occasionally.
It's
And
only just finished.
yeah, just finished. So Rogue Trader, I expect, will also get DLC or at least some balance patches post-launch of Dark Heresy. But as far as having like consequences for Xenos and stuff like that, you're right that the Inquisition pretty much has to go to war with the Rogue Trader if they ever want to deal with them. Xenos factions will also have a hard time because Rogue Traders will also employ Xenos technology, where a
Mhm.
regular Imperium faction simply would not. I think it's a really cool thing to have in a game. And on the note of, the Act 3 with no spoilers, that's probably like the most controversial act for a few people, because you kind of get like locked out of like your character classes without spoiling anything. And
Mm.
I feel like that was probably my least favorite experience in my initial playthrough of the game. I didn't mind it as much on the following playthrough because I knew what to do. But getting on
Well,
like,
yeah,
we're saying?
yeah, yeah. To build on that, like, it's like you said, the first time you do that, you're like, "Oh, this sucks." But then for you to play through it, you're like, "Actually, no, that's the first time I've ever been helpless, and the first time I've ever seen consequence." So it really stands out, and it also starts bridging together all the acts to explain what happened in Act One, why that happened, what was going on in Act Two, why the dynasty is in a downward state, because you're essentially going around repairing what your predecessor had done because for some reason you're on the decline. It's working out the mystery
That's a great
around that.
point. I think Rogue Trader actually does a really, really good job of like the more you think about it, the more sense it makes. And that's usually the sign of a good CRPG to me, is it's like, okay, why are we doing this? And like the more you figure out, the more logic there actually is to the actions of the characters and where the story has gone. Even though I feel like, Act 4 and 5 are a little underbaked right now, it still makes sense as like where your characters end up, even though it's a little bit like, anticlimactic at the end. But still, I imagine by the time Rogue Trader is finished in its DLC development, Act 4 and 5 will feel pretty good compared to where they are now. Now, I want to talk about the balance as well, because a lot of the complaints about Rogue Trader were that the balancing for classes was like really lopsided. You had characters like Argenta that were just way stronger than like the Space Wolf companion Ulfar. How do you feel about that now in the current state of 1.5?
Well, they did a lot to fix that. So they fixed some of the companions base builds. Starrick, one of the community managers, even mentioned that the only reason they touched all files because I was heavily going on about it. So a lot of people who play on lower difficulties were very happy with how the Space Marine was represented, but people who play on higher difficulties noticed that he was just so much weaker than the Sister of Battle. It didn't make sense how weak he was by comparison, and it wasn't that he was a bad companion. It was the fact that he was doing 1/10 what she was doing, and I was like, this is Nastartes. This is the poster boy of the entire setting. Why is he the weakest companion? But with this update, they have vastly improved him. They vastly improved his base build. They vastly improved his gear. They've given him more gear options. So he's gone from only having access to like a knife and a chainsaw to also having power axes, power swords, a power hammer. The biggest issue Ulfar has in the current balance of the game is there's nothing for him to kill, because the late Act 4 is kind of sparse and Act 5 is completely empty. But high hopes for DLC 3 to directly expand the later half of the game if that's what the community pushes for, because the Owlcat will be looking to the community for their next feedback survey for 1.5, which will go out to Reddit, and that is going to be heavily what they base the next DLC on.
That's interesting. How do you feel? Actually, brings me to my next point here. How do you feel Owlcat listens to feedback compared to like other companies for 40K games? You feel like you're really like Owlcat is very responsive to the player base, responsive to their content creators. Like, what has your experience with that been?
Well, I found it to be absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I came in early, disappeared, came back late, was doing my own thing, and I actually got invited in to the developers to do early testing for, early access for DLC 1, early access DLC 2, and then testing and feedback for patch 1.5. And they are very open about it. They're very transparent, but they can't be as open and transparent as I would like with their customers, because of obviously that has to go through all their PR and marketing teams.
And Games Workshop.
But
Well,
yes, and especially Games Workshop. but they do listen to feedback. Like, there's never been a time where I found an issue in a game, made a big deal about it, and then spoken to a developer, and then the developers give me the impression they weren't aware. But what they can do is obviously limited by time, money, and technical ability of the game that they're doing. And they can't just drastically overhaul systems, because that can trigger like massive EU laws for refund policies if they completely change the base game. So how they can implement stuff, it can be very limited. And obviously, even small changes can cause massive backlash. Like, one of the most broken, overpowered classes in the game got a minor cost to an ability that was the strongest ability in the game. And after the cost, it's still the strongest ability in the game, but people were demanding boycotts because now they had to think before they pressed the button.
That's, I mean, I feel like in any game you come across, you see this in Baldur's Gate 3 as well, which is an even easier game than Rogue Trader, in my opinion, where you still have people who are like, oh, the game's too difficult, even like the easier difficulties. Some people, they don't necessarily want to interact with like the systems of the game at the same level as like another player, or like to the same degree as another player. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but I feel like this game gives you a lot of options for your difficulty sliders that shouldn't matter too much. Like, if you want to play really overpowered builds, you can turn down the enemy HP, you can turn up your HP to be like double and stuff like that. So I just feel like it doesn't really like, it's not like the biggest issue. Usually, do you feel like this game is balanced primarily around its highest difficulty, or is it like a mid-tier difficulty?
It's definitely balanced around the lower difficulty, because there is a big divide in the community of people that think the game's too hard because it is a complex system with over 800 talents getting close to 900. I manage a spreadsheet with every talent, every ability in the game, so I'm very aware when they change things, how much it does impact, because I have to update that. But once you really understand the system, you master the system, you know how all the interactions work, the game does become too easy, because at the core of the combat loop, what you have access to as a player is far more powerful than what the AI has access to. And this is like extra turn stacking. You can guarantee going before the enemy and take him 5 turns and then wipe the entire battlefield before they've even had a chance to get into cover, sort of thing. So later parts of the game become too easy, whereas earlier parts of the game are too hard. Like, the hardest encounter in the game on the hardest difficulty is the tutorial boss. That, like,
The Aurora boss, yeah.
No, the Chaos Spawn.
Oh, the Chaos Spawn, really, you think?
Yeah,
I guess that technically is, yeah. That is true,
by the time
actually.
I get to Aurora, I can set my defenses up and he does 0 damage. I had my so Abelard, I had him knocked down by Aurora, and he never got back up, and Aurora kept hitting him whilst he was on the floor, but he was taking like 4 damage because I'd already set my defensive buffs. So yeah, he was just going.
That is true. The Chaos Spawn probably is just the hardest boss in the entire game, isn't he?
Well, it one-shots any companion that isn't the warrior. So it's strong. It's like the first main combat on Rykad, the first world in Act 1. There are enemies that can do 45 damage on a burst fire. Your characters have like 15 to 23 health. So you do get one shot, unless you know how to turbocharge and kill everything before they act. So it is a bit of a game of rocket tag, of whoever goes first just wins.
Pretty much. That was something I experienced when I was playing on Unfair versus a Chaos Spawn a few patches ago. I would say that, that's pretty common for a lot of CRPGs, that they just get way easier when you get into like the late game, because you have so many more options, and options are usually what save your life in a turn-based game especially. And I felt like the balancing, like, officers were very, very overpowered when the game came out. Would you say it's been fixed at all, or do you feel like the characters are still wildly overpowered, or like there's a huge discrepancy between the class archetypes, or do you think it's in like a much better spot now?
Well, definitely in a much better spot, but the problem that's had is the power creep has made everything too strong. So originally officers were crazy because they could infinite stack extra turns, they always went first. So they took that ability away to always go first, and they put it on a tier 2, but that means if you go into that tier 2 archetype for officer, you're still just as overpowered as you were at launch. But all the other buffs that they gave to justify taking that away has made them just stronger than they were at launch. And it's the same with all the other archetypes. Like Warrior, when they did DLC 1, kind of lost its identity because Blade Dance was just infinitely better at everything it wanted to do. But then with DLC 2, they added shields and they revamped it. And then Warrior is now the premier frontline, I survive in combat. And then I can build up with gear towards the end game the same damage that Blade Dance just has access to naturally. So towards the end of the game, they balance out. But at the start of the game, Blade Dance in combat, much more deadly for damage, but warriors survive and blade dancers get one shot. And towards the end, they sort of balance out there. Soldiers can never really survive in melee combat, but towards the end of the game, they do so much damage it doesn't matter. They're clearing the map anyway. The only archetype I'd say is really underpowered right now is probably Operative, and that's because their mechanic doesn't work on extra turns. So the core gameplay loop is you can stack extra turns to wipe out enemies before they act. However, the exploit mechanic, which is what operatives do, they put out these special little stacks they interact with that can increase their damage, decrease enemy damage, or they can remove their defenses. Oh, it doesn't activate on extra turns. So if you give an extra turn to an operative, it's essentially just got no talents and no damage riders. So it's just using base gear stats. Whereas on their main turns, they're quite impactful, but they might not survive to their main turn. So you tend to not build for that. So because of that, they're a little bit weaker. And I've been pestering the devs nonstop that they need their mechanic to work on extra turns, because whilst this is your core gameplay loop, even if you didn't intend it to be, you've now got a class that doesn't function in the meta of the game that you
Yeah, that's definitely something I
created.
noticed. It's like extra turns. I mean, you know, action economy is always huge in a turn-based game in general, and extra turns are just everywhere in Rogue Trader since launch. Now, despite the power creep of the game, do you think that Rogue Trader is still like satisfying to play in the combat? Like, do you feel like you're still having fun despite blowing through every single enemy? I always feel like Rogue Trader was pretty fun for that, because it is entertaining to like watch your guy just send out like 15 bolter rounds and stuff like that, watch the number go up. A lot of people don't mind this in games like Baldur's Gate 3, where like by the end of Baldur's Gate 3, you were just completely overpowered. Like, you just one try every boss. Even on like honor mode, it's just like incredibly easy for players to know the game.
Yep.
But it's still fun because it's just properly represented. You feel like that's the case in 40K Rogue Trader?
Yeah, it is the same. Like, the early part of the game is very challenging. The first part of the second act is also very challenging. But then once you get out to free explore, it's very hard for them to balance it, because if you go left and I go right, they have to balance that for that being valid decisions for both of us, because someone else could go north instead. And that means that everything is too easy depending on the route you take. Like, one encounter that if you went there first, would be really challenging. But if I go there last, that's going to be really easy. And unfortunately, that means that the experience that you get in Act 2 wildly differs. So, like, there's one encounter that you can go to very accidentally, which is inspired by it's called the Derelict Void Ship, and it's very much like Event Horizon, the movie, where it's a ship has been fucked up by the warp, it's come back, and you're exploring to see all this crazy chaos shit.
I remember that one. That was good.
Yeah, and then towards the end of it, you fight a chaos engine. And if you go there at the beginning of Act 2 and you're level 18, that guy will fuck you up. Like, and
that's actually what I did. That's the first place I went.
Yeah, and it will almost be unwinnable without expert game knowledge. Whereas it's to the point it's technically a challenge run to go there straight away without like picking up any gear or level. But if you come back level 25-ish, fairly easy. You come back level 30-ish, you're one-shotting him, sort of.
Yeah, it's a cool area, though. I think things like that are good for games. I mean, maybe that's like a hot take, but I've always felt like having an area, like I look back to Dark Souls 1, where, you know, you can go into the catacombs and all the skeletons are just way out of your you know, your damage range at the time, and that's a totally valid option for you to try to do that, but like the game will kind of force you out and you'll be like, okay, I probably shouldn't go here yet. And I think that's kind of good for games. It gives players like something to come back to later. But, you know, you want to be careful to like not lock people in an area like that, because like my issue when I was in the Derelict ship was I went there, I could not get out. All my saves were like my earliest save before that was like 3 hours ago, and I was just stuck with all these like corrupted tech frees, and I'm like, I'm just fucked. Like, there's actually nothing I can do.
Once you trigger it, you have to fight your way out. So you can go in and explore as much as you want until you do the final trigger. You pop that final trigger, you're fighting your way out.
Yeah,
like, you don't have to go straight for the demon engine, but you have to fight all the heretics to get out. Yeah, but I prefer that. So this is going to be controversial. The game should be balanced like that. Like, you should be punished for going to the wrong place early, and if you survive, then you should be rewarded. Whereas if you then decide this isn't for me and I'll come back later, then that's perfectly valid. And that is how it was originally balanced. But they got so many complaints that Owlcat nerfed the base game, DLC 1 and DLC 2 for that exact reason, because with DLC 2 especially, as a recent one, if you went to the Heartless ship, which is where the first part of DLC 2 starts, it's an encounter designed for level 26. You go there at level 18, when it's the earliest you can do, you will get annihilated. But you can do it, because I did it. I one-turned it, and I videos for that. Whereas people complain so much, they actually lowered the encounter to be designed for level 19, which I think is the worst thing to do, because now the people that think the game's too easy is like, well, you just made your easy game easier. Why?
I think that's a good point. That's like, you know, you definitely don't want to like make players feel like they're being overly punished for like going somewhere early. But I think it is a healthy thing for games to just have like these ridiculously difficult areas you can go to immediately. Like I think it's
Yeah.
just a fun part of games for like a lot of gamers. I think like CRPGs especially benefit from that because like every CRPG I have ever played, pretty much from like Fallout all the way up to now, it's just like okay, there's certain areas you can go and you just get shit on. Like you run into a
Yeah.
death claw even in like Fallout New Vegas and like the one quarry pit, and you're like, okay, I just die with like a stealth boy because it's just the way it's designed to be. And things like that are actually pretty fun as long as there are clever ways to get around them. Now, as far as future balancing for the game goes, do you think they're going to lean more into the direction of like this power creep, or do you think they're going to bring up some of the difficulty again? Is that like something they've been talking about to you in like or like, you talk to the developers about and they've given you their opinion on? Something like that?
Well, one of the community managers, a chap called Starrick, who's an absolute gem and asset, they've been trying to push brutal mode for a long while, and they keep floating ideas to sort of get the community behind it, because at the end of the day, for the development team to actually do it, the 1.5 survey needs to have that as people saying it. Their last survey got 35k people respond, and a lot of people were saying the game was too hard, so the game got made easier. If people say we want a separately balanced mode, like honor mode, where you can change massive mechanics, but it doesn't affect the base game, so we can have that mode, then they'll do it. There just needs to be incentive to them. Like if there's a financial incentive for them, they'll do it. If it's going to retain players or increase their sales, then they'll do it. But the community needs to make it clear that no, we're here, we want to keep going here. There's 10k of us minimum concurrent at all times. We want this difficult challenge for those that want it, not to punish those who don't. So you can have those sort of things, which is like you said, honor mode did the same. When honor mode came out, it nerfed every strategy I used on Tactician, and I thought that was fantastic. So then I had to relearn how I encountered it. However, it turned out they didn't nerf any of the box stacking or barrel stacking.
No, they're not.
The rest
That's
of
the
the community was
barrelmancy.
using. It was the one strategy I didn't use. It's the one strategy they didn't nerf.
Yeah, I always enjoyed as far as like difficulty levels in games go, I feel like difficulty levels are, they're inherently gatekeeping at some point, because eventually you cannot make a difficulty for literally every player because the game will just be playing itself. But I feel like having like these ridiculously hard challenge modes that you can do in a game, I think that's good for a game. Like I think that really helps out, really capture the most dedicated players to your game. And if you make every single difficulty just like a breeze for the most dedicated players, which at some point it kind of will be in most games, especially in turn-based games, because turn-based games, usually there's like a right and wrong option, and the biggest issue people come up to, as long as like they give you a proper puzzle to solve, I think that is the fun part of any turn-based game for me. And overall, I don't really mind having to like get my shit kicked in the video game over and over and over if I feel like I am being rewarded for like using all the game assets. Like what I mean by that is, the thing I love in video games is when I'm forced to use every single mechanic on offer, I actually have to think about like what has the developer given me as a tool, and I have to use all of it to actually beat the encounter within my build. And I think that's the whole point of build variety in a video game, is that like you can basically just go like, I'm gonna play within this little archetype, and I'm gonna use every tool within that archetype, and if something that allows me to just like hammer smash one guy over and over and over with one ability, that's where I get bored, and that's when I think something needs to be changed.
Oh no, I completely agree. To go back to your Dark Souls analogy, if there is a challenge in the game that seems too hard, I actually like that it adds to the world building, because the world feels like it exists independent of you. If the world scales with you, it feels like what you're doing kind of doesn't matter as much, because the world doesn't exist without you. And with the challenge, I like the idea that if this is too hard for me to do at level 18, but I do it anyway, I could have mid-level or end-game items early, and then I'll get to enjoy being really overpowered for a time when I do the appropriate level content. And like having to actually engage with the mechanics, that's the one thing I hate. I hate games, and this is kind of what they did with Kingmaker and Wrath originally, that just pad numbers, where it's not hard, it's just long. Like I don't like doing a 4 or 5 hour boss battle in Final Fantasy, stuff like that. I want to be mechanically challenged. And it's like, I watched Jeffkus do his Unfair stream the other day, and he was fighting the tutorial boss, and he didn't really struggle. He got through it. Sure, it wasn't the most spectacular one, but he didn't have to engage the mechanic at all to beat it. And I don't think he realized that it was there, which is the boss has really high natural armor for being a warp mutated chaos entity. Idara has the ability to stack exploits and then remove the enemy's armor. He didn't use that once. He just spammed psychic powers, which every time you use has a 5% chance for you to die. And he did that 27 times and did not get any consequence. I was just sat there like, Wow. He was able to brute force his way through and entirely ignore the intentional mechanic that it explained to you in the encounter before. Like, he skipped that dialogue. He didn't care. He was just like, bam, 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 just smashed his way through.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you can do that on the hardest difficulty, then clearly it is too easy.
Now there is a permadeath mode in the game currently, and
Yes.
do you feel like that is too easy as well, or do you think that's like a completely separate thing?
It actually highlights where the only challenge was in the game. So in combat, I've never had the issue where I've lost a combat. However, I have definitely lost in space combat, which is a mini game that can end your run, as well as there are book encounters that have a percentage chance to end your run. And that's kind of why I don't like it. There are a lot of times where you'll have to random roll a skill that you might not have known that you needed at that point, where if you don't make this success, you insta-die and it ends your run and deletes your save. That I don't enjoy, because I feel like I get cheated. Because if I'm in a combat and I make a dialogue option and then everyone decides to smash my face in, at least I have the opportunity to fight. But if this is an unavoidable check, make a strength check or you insta lose. And I'm like, if I'm a ballistic skill build,
Do you feel
I'm
that's an
guilty.
oversight from Owlcat on that part, or is it like intentional?
Oh, it definitely was at first, because I pointed this out, because in testing I had a 0% chance to make that save, and I was like, dude, I literally can't make this save. Like,
Literally
GG. But they load it to it's now a 55% chance to succeed. I'm like, yeah, but that's a 45% chance that I just
That you just
my
lose
run,
your
and
entire run.
and it's completely outside of my control. And it's like, well, just make a strength build, duh. And it's like, well, that's not good balancing either. It's like, oh, only this one build is viable, because if you don't, you lose an auto check. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, I feel like for checks should not be a game ender. And it's actually a great thing that you brought up there, that like I see this a lot in turn-based games where people hate randomness. Like, some players love the randomness of a game like XCOM, and other players just despise having percentage chances to succeed at something. I feel like that is the fun of a turn-based game for me in a lot of cases, is like,
Yep.
how do you basically push the variables in your favor? Now, that's the whole point of a turn-based game for most, at least for like most of the CRPGs these days, and I think that's like the whole fun of the game. And without these randomness factors, you're gonna basically be stuck into like, okay, if you know the builds in the game, you will always win, because the only way you can really, at least in my opinion, one of the only ways you can really push a player in a turn-based game is by giving them that randomness factor, because that's what takes away their game knowledge. That's what allows you to have like a dynamic encounter, and without randomness, every encounter is gonna have like a guaranteed way to complete it.
Well, yeah, it's a visual novel without it, because if I've made the perfect build, I'm just clicking through text. Whereas, say something like Space Marine has mechanics that challenge you, it's your reflexes and your aim. That's where the check is there. This is game knowledge, so you use your game knowledge to overcome the randomness. So all my builds are designed to be able to counteract the randomness, and that's the challenge. That's the knowledge check. That's the skill of the game. Is, can you build to be prepared for a situation that there is a random roll? But when it's unless you do this specifically, you insta lose. That's kind of bad. But having 95% chance to get a shot, and there's a scenario where if I make this shot, easy encounter, I don't take any injuries. I miss this shot, there's a chance he kills my character because I've put him in a bad position. Now my choice is, do I go for the kill, or do I hang back and go into the next turn? So that is something that I enjoy, and that's a better game philosophy design for that. And I hope that they stick with that, because at the moment I win every encounter from like Act 2 in turn 1, and that's too much. I think that I should have to play cautiously, that I don't overextend, and that's what they did with their Blade Dancer quote unquote nerf, which was, if you overkill and use their ability to break the attack economy, you lose dodge stacks, which means some of the gun can shoot you. But it's still very easy to counterplay around that. But now that I have to think about that, that's changed how I use the class. And I've went from my last 2 runs not touching the archetype because I thought it was too powerful, to now I actually do mix it in, because now I actually have to think about how I use it.
Now, on the note of what you mentioned with Jeff, basically just like going 27 times with like a 5% chance of instantaneously dying, do you think the game is currently set up in a way that like new players will feel challenged, and like it's really only the super experienced players are like, this is way too easy? Or do you think it's just too easy for like 90 or like maybe like 70% of the players are currently playing the game?
If you've never played a CRPG, it will be too overwhelming, to the point that's why my YouTube channel exists.
Yes.
If you are a pro at CRPGs, you will still find it much harder than, say, Baldur's Gate 3 on a mode, even on, say, Daring, which is the base normal difficulty, whereas normal's actually sub-normal. It's easy. The naming's weird, but you will find a really good challenge. Like my first run I went in, Act 1 was a bit tricky, but I'd come off from a lot of old CRPGs. And then by the time I got to Act 2, I was like, actually, no, this is too easy. And then I restarted on the hardest difficulty. And then that's where I found my love for the game. Because I feel like the most enjoyable part is engaging the game at the highest difficulty, because there is a potential you could die. Like in the encounters, I can, yes, one turn and do every encounters, but how well can I one turn it is the sort of challenge for me, because I can make a mistake and lose several members that then make them unusable in that area. And then I have to consider, do I go for the boss fight, or do I potentially give this planet to the Xeno so I don't have to do the boss encounter?
Now, I feel like that's a great option of well, I should say this takes me to another thing I want to talk about is like save scumming in games like this. Do you think it's better for players like on their first run to just like go with all the mistakes and go with all like the random choices they have made and like the accidents that have happened along the way? I feel like Iron Man modes are a huge controversy point for a lot of people. People are like, oh, I want to save scum, I don't want to lose my characters. But I feel like in a CRPG like this, outside of a few situations, it can be pretty fun for like, okay, all my party members are dead and now I have to engage in diplomacy for a boss fight I would otherwise try to fight on its own. And like that's where the fun of the game comes from. And the final thing I really wanted to touch on here was, how do you think the lessons of Rogue Trader in the current state of Rogue Trader are going to translate over into the upcoming Dark Heresy?
Well, I agree that I try not to save scum in these games. I have friends who they will save scum every dice check in the game because they want to have what they consider the perfect ending. But there's no such thing in Rogue Trader. It's grimdark. It's Warhammer 40k. You could pick on paper the best possible option, and then in the end slides you find out that got your entire dynasty wiped out, and it's like you can't save scum back 120 hours now, can you? But when it comes to, say, Iron Man mode, there is still a lot of save brick and bugs. Like when we did the Grimdark Challenge, which is how I first got in touch with the developers, and we did the sort of the streamer speedrun challenge, I bricked the game 3 times to the point that developers had to unbrick my save using cheat tools to restart and re-jiggle quests. But like I killed a boss too hard before it triggered the second cutscene. Without that cutscene, I was stuck in the boss arena, and that was it. And I lost time in the speedrun because of it, because I was like, yeah, I'm stuck, can't do anything. So I just had to leave the game, and I sent my file over to devs who actually had to like use cheat tools to get it going. So Grimdark is still a bit on the fence about if you should do it. And there's actually still quick save bugs. Like if you have any items that increase your stats, if you quick save and quick load, it will enhance your stats by that modifier again, quick save, quick load again, and it'll keep doing it again until you can get infinite stats. So obviously they did not balance the game around the idea of you quick save, quick loading either. But I'd say hard save beginning of each world, see what the consequences are, and just keep going from there.
Yeah, it's kind of like, like you're playing a tabletop game after all, where it's like,
yeah,
it's what's in the heart of the game for you as a player. I feel like, losing your, Rogue Trader and CRPGs in general, they kind of taught me to play games in a bit of a different way, where initially when I played games when I was younger, like, Oblivion or Skyrim, and I was like, I want to do everything. I want to complete every single quest. I want to get every single item. I want to have every build at once. I want to be like the ultimate warrior mage and things like that. I think playing CRPGs really kind of like made my thought process go from that to, I want to have this character do like this particular run, and then I'll try something new in the next one. I feel that's where a lot of the replayability just comes from in these games, where you don't have to do literally everything in a CRPG. You don't have to have the perfect ending every single time. Like your world, like your finale could just be like the worst possible outcome for every character, and you're like, let's say, without spoiling anything, I found out somebody was like a cultist at the end of my screen because I just completely skipped the dialogue. I didn't know that there was like anything going on about like, wait, they're a cultist. I just like left an entire world underneath the cult. And it's one of those things where like, okay, I'm gonna go back and learn that story. And on my second playthrough, I went back in and I was like, whoa, there's this whole portion I just completely missed. That's so cool. I think that's where the fun of the game comes from for me in a lot of cases, because I mean, I can be pretty casual in terms of just playing a CRPG for the story, just enjoying like what my character is going to be in it. I think that Rogue Trader does capture a very unique power fantasy for that reason, because as a Rogue Trader, you have all this power, but like you as an individual, you're just a dude. So there's a lot of fun to be had there. I'm curious how you feel about, on the other note of what I said here, how this is going to lead up into Dark Heresy and how they're going to take all the things they've learned from Rogue Trader and implement them into that.
Well, you can see based on their free patches, like their 1.1, the 1.2, the 1.3, 1.4, and now 1.5, how they're evolving their design philosophy. You can see that they wanted to make your build more meaningful. They wanted to make your origins more meaningful. They wanted to give you more diversified build options. They didn't want you to be, if you pick this origin, you have to play this archetype. And they're putting that more in. And like you said with the story stuff, like your first run, there's a very endearing NPC who was my favorite NPC, and we used to like hang out and smoke on the bridge because you can engage with them to go for those dialogue options at least once. And then he turned out to be like this whole thing, and then you're like, oh, damn. And then the second time played, how I engage them is completely different. You get a completely different feeling from them, and that's absolutely fantastic. I'm hoping they take those lessons going into Dark Heresy, because Dark Heresy is, of course, you're not going to be a consequence-free rogue trader. You're an inquisitorial acolyte. You're not someone who has infinite power. You can suffer consequence. And at the same time, I want my origin to matter more, to have more reactivity based on how I can approach things. And the same with sort of my build. Like if I'm built heavily for combat, then I'm going to solve things with force. If I'm built heavily for being the face of the party, I'm going to try and solve it with my words. And as long as they've learned that those different paths are all viable to different players and different approaches, then that will do very well. And especially if they keep in mind that there are certain playstyles people want that they didn't support in this game, which is, what is the most iconic thing for you when it comes to combat in Warhammer 40k, would you say? Like, not the, like, say the Space Marines, but I mean, like, what is the most iconic style of combat, would you say?
I feel like it would just be like melee hybrid in a lot of cases, or like just, I mean, really depends.
Exactly.
On like, yeah.
You literally got there. You said that on the first try. Basically, this game does not support melee hybrids at all. So your first tier archetype determines how you play. You're either a buffer, a debuffer, you're melee, or you're ranged. That's it. And to actually be a mixed attacker, you have to take a very specific tier 2 archetype, which then limits which tier 1s you can even pick. And even then, it only enables you to get hits and criticals, but all of your damage and defensive defining talents are in your tier 1. So if you pick a melee tier 1 archetype, but you want to have a melee gun, you're going into your tier 2 and then into your tier 3, and you're basically you've got the God Hammer in one hand and you've got a Nerf Dart in the other. Or if you do it the other way, you do it Soldier, where you want to be a melee, well, suddenly you've got the Sunbeam of the Emperor himself in one hand, and in the other hand, you have a foam sword and you're made of tissue paper. So it's I hope that they do more divergent paths with builds. Like if I like one of the companions, the next one's going to be a jungle fighter, a Catachin, is it Catachin Devil?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, the Death World Jungle guys that are based on sort of the Rambo Predator style movies. Yeah, they're useful for setting up like heavy gun tripods, but we also know that they're snipers. We also know that they're knife users. They do assassinations. So how do you represent that in the game if I'm playing a soldier? And if that companion's that, then obviously if he's just a soldier, that means I build heavy guns. But people are going to be like, no, jungle fighters, they use knives and melee tactics. So are they going to check, because the amount of systems that they're changing from Rogue Trader to Dark Heresy, they've already confirmed it's going to be as big as changing from Kingmaker to Wrath of the Righteous. And there was a lot of gameplay and balance changes, and even a lot of mechanical changes that came in with that as well. And I hope they do something like that, where if I play soldier, maybe I've got more of a close combat soldier or a mid-range soldier or a long-range soldier, and there's ways that I can diversify those options. Because like the subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3, for example, like as much as people don't like 5th edition, that does help define what you have access to a lot more. And I hope that they do take those lessons going into Rogue Trader, so I don't have to answer the millionth question of how do I do mixed hybrid attack.
Now, I'm curious on the note of Baldur's Gate 3, how much of Dark Heresy do you feel like is a direct response to Baldur's Gate 3's massive success? Because Baldur's Gate 3 pretty much just came out, Larian was like, this is the biggest CRPG ever, basically. And now the bar has been raised so high for a lot of players based on like Larian's game play after that point, because D&D blew up. Players that never liked CRPGs at all suddenly got into CRPGs just based off of Baldur's Gate 3. A lot of the people that I've talked to have played Rogue Trader specifically because they played Baldur's Gate 3 and they're like, what other CRPGs are there? It's like, okay, there's Wrath of the Righteous and this, and they went into this and they're like, okay, I love this game too. Do you feel like Dark Heresy is going to be seriously inspired in a lot of ways? I feel like the voice acting in particular, like them really trying to lean into that, I feel like that is directly because Larian set the bar so high. How do you feel about that?
Well, they have to, because there's no way that obviously Games Workshop are going to look at free money that was being printed for Wizards of the Coast and not think, I want some of that.
That's true.
And as the same for Owlcat as a developer, there's no way they can look at that and be lazy. They're going to say, no, we have to put in everything. We have to impress. This needs to be the best launch we've ever had. We can't have people saying that this game's going to be unplayable for a year, because then we won't have the success we need to keep this going and to keep that drive going. So I hope that it's going to have a very positive impact. Like, personally, I don't care about full voice acting or even cutscenes, because as a CRPG player, I'm a fast reader. I tend to skip almost every dialogue anyway. But that's what opens it up to majority. The reason Baldur's Gate 3 was so successful wasn't because it was an innovative game. It's mechanically, it's one of the worst CRPGs I've ever played. But narratively, visually, it's one of the best, because
it's the presentation. It's a AAA CRPG basically,
and I don't even mean the narrative as the story, because like the story of Baldur's Gate 3 again is terrible, but I mean the way they present the story, the full voice acting, the mocap, the animations, the companion intrigue, the fact that I call it a dating sim, because Baldur's Gate 3 is more of a dating sim.
It totally is, yeah, pretty much.
And that's why it's so successful. So if you do that, we now know that they can make 1 million players, whereas they don't need it to be their Baldur's Gate 3. They want it to be their Divinity Original Sin 2, and then they can set up for their Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, I know Owlcat, like, they're smart enough to know they can't just dive into, like, the massive success that Larian's had immediately, because, like, they're just not there yet. Like, Rogue Trader is not, like, one step behind in presentation from Baldur's Gate 3. It's, like, three steps behind it. So, it, like, the next game, I feel like, be a huge improvement, but I don't expect, like, mocap or anything like that for, like, at least another decade from them. But I feel like they'll get there eventually. And on the note of Baldur's Gate 3, you're right, it really is presentation. Like, the baseline story of Baldur's Gate 3 with, like, all the tadpoles, not very good, but it's still fun because you have really interesting characters within that, like, a goofy ass story, and it kind of plays around. It really hits like the major notes of a D&D campaign for that reason. And on top of that, you also have Rogue Trader hitting the major notes of a 40k game, despite having like some like jank around it. And I really do feel like going into Dark Heresy, we're probably going to see a pretty big golden age for 40k stories.
Oh yeah.
And hopefully Dark Heresy will directly influence or like maybe push the story forward in the world. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be for like what time period we're going to be in, because Rogue Trader took place right during the fall of Cadia. Like, there's a point in Rogue Trader where like the Great Rift is ripped open in the middle of the game. So it is interesting to see that Games Workshop is kind of pushing this narrative. I feel like we are kind of building up across all forms of 40k media into what is inevitably going to be the Henry Cavill show and probably Space Marine 3, because that seems to be where things are really kind of headed towards right now.
Yeah. Well, Dark Heresy is obviously going to heavily feature the Night Lords, which is obviously going to be a big draw for general audiences. It's got heavily Inquisition stuff, so that, again, that's going to be a big draw. It's going to have the Tyrant Star, which is less obvious, but the visuals are going to be fantastic for that. And yeah, the story is going to be more focused, and it's going to be in the Calaxis sector, so it does open a lot more what they have access to. And I think it's going to be, again, not too long after the Great Rift was formed, but it's going to be in that sort of time frame there. I don't think we're going to see like any Primaris Marines or anything, because I still think it's going to be before that.
I mean, we'll see what they do. I know the fact that they finally put in Night Lords is a great thing, because like, let's be real, Space Marines are the most popular property in 40k currently, and pretty much forever. So whenever Games Workshop has the opportunity to like stuff a Space Marine into their game, they're probably going to, because it's usually just great for their marketing. And hopefully Dark Heresy properly represents Night Lords. The Night Lords are like my second favorite heretic chapter behind like the Death Guard. And I do hope they are properly maintained in this game, because they're kind of shitters, and having them in a CRPG could lead to some pretty interesting encounters. I'm curious to see how the balance of Dark Heresy is going to be, but obviously, it's such an early stage, we have no idea. But as far as what, like you said before, on the melee hybrids being like the primary form of like fabled 40k combat, that is kind of what it is. Like 90% of media for 40k is like, it's a guy with a bolt pistol and a guy with a chainsaw. It doesn't matter if it's a commissar, it doesn't matter if it's a space marine. It's about like, it's basically bayonets into like shooting guys into bayonets. That's like 90% of 40k combat. That's what people really like to see, because that's like where it gets really personal, intimate, with like the space marines fighting Tyranids and stuff like that. So I think we covered pretty much everything we wanted to talk about here. I will say, if you are someone that has not played Rogue Trader and you are this late into the video, Rogue Trader is usually on sale. It is quite cheap. The DLCs are also not overpriced whatsoever. And are there any closing thoughts you have on the state of the game, Revan?
Yes, well, obviously, a couple of things on the balance are still we didn't quite get into, but I think a lot of DLC can address that, and especially because they are expanding mechanics. So we've got 2 more DLC, so at least a year of support. The alpha for Dark Heresy, which is going to be open to people that have already pre-ordered, starts on the 16th of December, and it will last until the beta, and that will last until launch. I hope that they follow Baldur's Gate 3 example, and we get iterative updates, and it's not just going to be, here's the alpha, nothing changes till the beta, here's the beta, nothing changes till the launch. I hope we will see updates as we go through it, so we can really playtest it and get our feedback. And yeah, if you want to get into that, but you're not sure if you want to spend the money, start playing Rogue Trader now whilst it's on sale. Fantastic time to do so.
Definitely play Rogue Trader.
You can even check out some of my videos.
Yeah, check out Revan's videos. He has some great build guides for it.
Or if not, just take my spreadsheet. You don't even need me. Just download the spreadsheet, pretend I don't exist, and just use it as a skeleton and then customize it as you learn through. I've got everything in there from loot tables, vendor shops, space resources, every talent and ability that's in the game, so you can just read it in a nice readable format rather than trying to fight the UI. And yeah, there's just a lot of stuff, and it is really fun. Like, I was a first-person shooter gamer, and I got stuck in the CRPG for a year. With
Yeah,
over
seriously,
1,000
guys,
hours
I would check out Revan's spreadsheets because unfortunately, the Wikipedia for Rogue Trader is like one of the worst game wikis, at least when I was playing, I've ever seen. Is like so unfinished, and Revan has done God's work for Rogue Trader and just like finding out the different items and build paths for the game, and it's been very, very helpful for a lot of players, including myself. Now, if you guys have not checked out Revan, you can find a link to his channel in the description below. Is there anything else you want to say on top of that? Out of curiosity?
No, obviously check it out. There's obviously some little animated videos that they did for a trailer for it. It does unfortunately spoil the end faction. So yes, if you watch the animated trailer, you know exactly who the final faction is, and it is my favorite faction. And like I said, I hope DLC 3 expands it, because at the moment they're weakened for story reasons, and it's the entire plot of the game. So you can understand why they're a bit of a pushover at the end. But if DLC 3 expands it, because yeah, Trajan's coming, and so's the Processional of the Damned. People know about that. Yeah. So yeah, now is a great time to try out the game, especially with the current balance. And then yeah, if you like it, then you can get right into the front line for the alpha. And then yeah, so it's a great time to be doing it. And like you said, there's loads of content coming for the other games. We're seeing Dark Tide updates, we're seeing Space Marine 2 updates.
Pretty big time for 40K games for sure.
Yeah, and then hopefully within the next year we might even start having like visual representation, seeing the hobby just really explode.
I definitely hope it does. But I think we covered everything there. Guys, if you've not tried out Rogue Trader, definitely pick it up on sale. 1.5 is out now, partially balanced by Revan himself. And also, we have the upcoming Dark Heresy, of course, and the upcoming DLC for Rogue Trader as well. If you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and thank you, Revan, for coming on and talking about this with me. And yeah, that's all we have to say today. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Take it easy, guys. Bye.